Biכורים Parak Daled. This parak is a little bit interesting because it may not be Mishnayos, it may just be a Brisa, and it's also interesting because it discusses something very interesting. It discusses the halachas of an Andragonus as a person who is an unknown gender because he was born with male and female body parts. Androgynous is a combination of the Greek words for man, andros, and a woman, gene. Androgynus. He has both simonim. So it discusses how such a person is regarded in the areas of halacha that differentiate between men and women. Although this parak is included in the standard editions of the Mishnayos, and we'll be referring to it as a Mishnah, many Mefarshim have learned that it belongs to the Tosefta of Biכורים in Parak Beis. For this reason, the Rishalmi and most Mefarshim of the Mishnah do not include this chapter in their Pirush on the Masechta. There are several different versions of this parak. Here we're using the one that appears in the standard Mishnayos called Nusach HaRashash, which largely resembles the one used in the commentary of the Rash. The Rashash could refer to Rash, whose full name was Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishant. So maybe that's who the Rashash was, not Reb Shmuel Strashun, who's in the back of the Vilna Gemara. So the subject of the Andragonus appears as an extension of the previous discussion from Parak Beis regarding the Koi, which was discussed in Parak Beis, Mishnah Ches through Mishnah Yud Aleph. Just as the Koi is comparable in some ways to a behemoth, and in some ways to a Chaya, in some ways to both, and in some ways to neither, the same four possibilities exist when comparing the Andragonus to a man and to a woman. So Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Andragonus yesh bo drachim shavel anoshim, and Andragonus has ways which he's similar to men, yesh bo drachim shavel anoshim, and he has ways in which his halachas will be like a woman. Yesh bo drachim shavel anoshim vil anoshim, he has something that he has in common with men and women. Yesh bo drachim sheini shavel loyla anoshim v'loyla anoshim, and he has ways in which he's not like men or women. And the next four Mishnayos are going to discuss what these four categories. Before we go into the Mishnayos, I want to just go through the Minchas Chinuch in Mitzvah Aleph and the Mitzvah of Pirvi Rivia. It goes through four different shittas of what an Andragonus might be. Four different shittas of Rishonim of how an Andragonus would work. Now it's interesting. You could go through all Taryag Mitzvahs and see exactly how it would work out. Each one, and you could make a whole Torah about it. Lamaisa, the Mishnayos is pretty much Bekatzer. It's only four Mishnayos. It's not so long. It covers a lot of areas, but let's see. So over here in Mitzvah Aleph, Ois Daled, V'mhoilid Andragonus u'beinoi bas, if a person has a child that's an Andragonus and a son or a daughter, Andragonus hainu sheyesh le'zachrus v'nakvus. Andragonus is a person who has simonim of a zachar and simonim of an nekeva, kamavur b'Rambam, Parak Beis Milchas Ishus. Like the Rambam writes in Parak Beis Milchas Ishus. So that's the Rambam Gam Ken Kol Makom Shu Safik. The Rambam writes everywhere that an Andragonus is a Safik. Mikol Makom that's the Rambam. The Andragonus ain't a Roy Lahoilit. The Rambam is clear in Hilchas Yibum that Andragonus cannot have children. V'cheini das a Rif. And the Rif holds the same way. Im Ken Bevadei Le'kayim Mitzvah. If the concept of the mitzvah of Pirvi Rivya is that this child that's born has to be able to further reproduce more children. If this child cannot have children, so then he's not going to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Pirya V'Rivya by having this Andragonus. So he's not able to be Mekayim this mitzvah because he cannot have children. The pasuk of Andragonus was Zachar V'Adai. There's a sheet of the Ri and the Rosh in Yavamis that hold that Andragonus is a Zachar V'Adai. Mikomakam Ineroi Lahoilet Kamvur Beis Yosef V'Torah Ibn Ezra Sim Kufayin Beis Mavur in the Beis Yosef that even if he's a Zachar V'Adai, he's not Roi Lahoilet, he cannot have his own children. V'Hisig Al Torah, and he's massing on the Torah, and he argues on the Torah Shekostav Das Ari V'Rosh Abba Andragonus V'Adai Zachar Choylet Samiyabim El Afilu L'Daita P'Tur Min HaChalitzim L'Yibum Dein Roi Lahoilet. So it's a question over there: is an Andragonus chayiv in Yibum, or he has to do Chalitza? But over here we're saying that he's potter from Chalitza and from Yibum because he cannot have children. Aval midavrei Taisvis Sham on Pei Beis and Beis in Yavamis Mavur Andragonus Yachal Lahil Min Isha. That an Andragonus can have a child like a woman. I know to be Yehuda Madur Tzinion Eben Ezra Siman Aleph Shamad Bnei Bechkirazu. The Noid Yehuda asked this question also. Maybe Divrei Taisvis Anal, and it brings this Taisvis that we just quoted. Vayinchum Shemei Sefer Echad, which is the Chasdei David and Biכורים, which is the Sefer on the Tosefta. So who goes through the Toseftas, all the Toseftas very, very thoroughly. So he goes through these dinim of Androgynous as the Tosefta goes through over there in Perek Beis and Bikurim. Shemafalpul b'zeh. Im kain. So it's like this. Im yachal lahoilid. So if the Androgynous could have children, l'shita zushu vadei zachar dinik ben gomer. So according to the shita that he's a vadei zachar, he has a din like a ben gomer, because if he could have children, why shouldn't he be considered a regular son to be mekayim the mitzvah of period v'rivya? Well, the shita shu safek, but according to the shita that holds that Androgynous is like a safek, after gamali bai roy lahoilid, could be that they still hold that Androgynous could have children, and they're not kliyim zebezeh, meaning that just because it's a suffix doesn't mean that he cannot have children. And just because he's right to have children doesn't make him a vadei zachar. It's very deep sugi over there. So it could be if he has Androgynous and a daughter, so then he's going to be Yitzim Misafik, he's a mitzvah of period. Dilma Androgynous zachar who, because there's a possibility that the Androgynous is a zachar, and he has a son and a daughter, because we're viewing the Androgynous as a ben. Avalam Hailad Androgynous ben, but if he has Androgynous and a son, Nir Mitzad Asvara, the Androgynous Mitaras Bas Leotza Klal. That Minasvara is not going to be Yotze with Androgynous will never be considered as a bas, because the only tzad vados that Androgynous has, we're bringing from these Rishonim, is that he would be a vadei zachar, but nobody holds that Androgynous is vadei nekeva. Yesh beidinim that he shaved to a nekeva, but it doesn't mean that his halachic definition is as a nekeva. Nehidi he bas, because on the tzad that he is a bas, he won't be able to birth a child like a woman would, like a regular woman would be able to birth a child from a man. But he's able to be moiled like a zachar. That in order to be mekayim the mitzvah of period it has to be kederach haaretz. V'keim Androgynous ein moiled meish kishar nekevis, since he cannot give birth, since he cannot father a child like other nekevis. Nira de lo yotza bevadai lo mitarasavik. So he's not going to be able to be yotze mivada. He's not able to be yotze misafik, because the MS is, if I'm not mistaken, although I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is that the reproductive system in this person is very, very shvach altogether, and it still exists today. There is a story that Ramesha Shapir Zacher Lavracha was very involved in being miyasid and being mechazek many of the communities throughout Argentina and elsewhere in South America, and he once got a call from someone in South America that had a child that was Androgynous, and they were very hurt and they were very confused as what they should do. They were lost as what they should do. Ramesh's react. They called another Rav, and the other Rav said, "Okay, well, we'll sit down, we'll figure it out, we'll go through the sugya, he and her." They called Ramesha about what to do. Ramesh's first thing was he started crying. He says, "What's this life of this child going to be like?" And it is very, very difficult. It's takanish pashat. I spoke to somebody. I heard from a doctor that it happens, and he's seen it more than once, and it's a small percentage of people, but unfortunately, it happens. But he says, he's back to the original question. Since he could have a child, since he could father a child, or he could mother a child, however you want to look at it over here, maybe it doesn't matter how he could have a child, as long as he's able to have a child. So that's going to be considered a good enough to be mekayim the mitzvah of perivya. Maybe it's only going to be chayiv and peruvu misafik tzarchin. So it's very murky, this question. So that's according to these shittas that he's going to be, that the Androgynous would be looked at as a zochar vadai or as a safik. Ladas arrived at Perek Beis in Hilchos Shofar. The Androgynous lav safiku. The Ravid in Hilchos Shofar learns that Androgynous is not a safik. That a Androgynous has the din of a chatzi zachar chatzi nekeva. He's half and half. He's like a chatzi av chatzi machar. If we say he's able to have children also, if we say that he could also have children, so the avada that mikomakum zev vada ain't svara. There's no svara here to the name of that we should say to Androgynous levad yotzi dechavas davle benubas. we're not going to say that he has two children over here because it's Chatzi Zachar or Chatzi Nekeva. That in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah of having a ben and a bas, you need to have two separate bodies that each one is able to have a child. Meaning a Zachar in a Zachar way and a Nekeva in a Nekeva way. This is only one guf, not two gufim. It has a problem that there's Simone Zachar and Simone Nekeva here. Achim Hoylid Androgynous Bas Afshad Yotza. But according to the Ravid, it may be that if he has a bas together and the androgynous, then he may be yotze. The androgynous is Zachar Vadai, because the androgynous is a Zachar Vadai and can still be moiled. So Vadai Yotze Dechavasai. If we hold that it's Chatzi and he has an androgynous and another bas, then it's Shaykh that he's going to be yotze. Achim Yeshle Ben Androgynous, but if he only has a son androgynous, after androgynous who gam ken Vadai Bas, even if we'll say that the androgynous has a vadai bas part to itself also, the way he's going to be moiled is like a male, not like a female. And maybe there's a kpeda in being mekayim the mitzvah that the child that's born has to be able to have children kedarach ha'aretz. And there's another shita that androgynous is b'fnei atzmai leish v'leisha v'min b'fnei atzmai. It's like in between thing. It's its own thing. It's a min b'fnei atzmai. V'teisus b'yavamis dachu shita zu v'ayim b'cheres daf man beis. The Taisus doesn't like this far. But that's a Rambam hilchos b'cheres. The androgynous nigzas v'nevad. That androgynous b'cheres it can be shorn and it doesn't have din of a b'chor. V'ayim b'lechem mishnah perik dalim hilchos ishus mefalpub zed the divrei Rambam sasri adodi. It's steering the Rambam because over here we're saying that it's bir b'fnei atzmai and become a mekayim is pasuk to have a suffix, so it's not clear. So the Rambam himself, although we said earlier that that's Rambam gamkem b'chol makom dehu suffix, but upon him there is a place where the Rambam learns that the androgynous is a bir b'fnei atzmai. V'ayin Ramban parak vav milchus b'cheres merit al gazi the daita kishita zu dumin b'fnei atzmai. The Ramban merit al gazi go with the shita that it is a bri b'fnei atzmai. If I show merit al gazi ba'erich, yesh min b'fnei atzmai shemalid me isha v'yelda me ish, that they can have children, they could like men and like women. V'zeh vada min b'fnei atzmai. This is vada something new because it's not something that regular people can do. V'vada leyotzi deichav piri v'rivi d'leihavi ish v'leihavi isha afal gav derech l'helu. It says an interesting gather. It says over here that agam, this person could have a child like a zachar and like in the keva. So then you'll say, so now what's wrong? You could be mekayim the mitzvah of period virivya. The vada leyotzi deichav is period virivya because it's not an isha, not an isha. Meaning that the chiyuv of period virivya, the mitzvah of period virivya, is to have either a bain or to have a bas. Over here, you don't have either one. Now, it could be there is a third min that exists, but to be mekayim this mitzvah, you don't have what you need. Mekamakim came into min b'fnei atzmai any yotzi. V'hinei l'harich b'nyoni androgynous, in order to be married properly in the nyoni androgynous, yavri yachloif v'molei roichev yam talmud, will pass the time that it would take to go through the whole yam talmud of any kind of mekayim. But upon him, here are the four shitas. That it's a suffix, either it's a suffix, or it's a vadai zachar, or it's a chatzi zachar, chatzi and keva, or it's a bri b'fnei atzma. Now, many of these shitas can be used interchangeably, but al kapanim, these are the four shitas rishonim of what an androgynous, what the halachic status of androgynous is. Mishnah Beis. Shovel anoshim ketzad. How is androgynous like men? Mentame beloven ka'anoshim. Like men, he becomes tamei with a white fluid that's discharged from his body. He becomes tamei like a zav, which is halacha only by men. And the women don't have this halacha b'chlal. So the Mishnah teaches that a androgynous who sees zav is tamei just like anoshim are. Like men, he can marry a woman, but he cannot be married to a man. The Mishnah refers to an androgynous marrying a woman in the active voice, and to an androgynous marrying a man in the be married to, because the act of kedushin, which affects marriage, is performed by the man. So if a kohen who's androgynous marries a woman, he gives her the right to eat truma because he might be a man. However, if an androgynous is married to a man, the androgynous does not receive the right to eat any truma since he might be a man. So then this marriage is going to be also. Like men, he may not be alone with women. The man is forbidden to be in a secluded place with a woman who is not a close relative. Although the Mishnah mentions only an androgynous being alone with women, an androgynous is also usher to be alone with a man, since an androgynous is possibly a woman. Our Mishnah does not add that halacha, however, because it's listing only the ways which androgynous is like a man. The einay nizayin im abonis ka'anashim, like men, he's not given food with the daughters. That means that if an androgynous' father dies and leaves behind property that's not enough to support all the children, so the daughters receive what they require for their support until they're adults, while the son, including the androgynous, receives only what's left over after that. When a father dies, the din ha-Torah is that his sons inherit all the property, and they must give an allowance to his daughters for their support until the daughters reach adulthood. However, if someone dies and does not have enough property to support his sons and daughters, the daughters receive the full amount they will need until adulthood, and the sons get only what remains. The Mishnah teaches that in the second case, where each daughter receives a greater amount than each son, the androgynous has no right to what the banos are going to yarshin, unless he shows that he's entitled to such a portion by proving that he's in a keva, which is impossible. Therefore, the androgynous receives no more than one of the sons. Like men, he does not wrap his head, cover his head, like women are mechuyev to cover their hair, and he cuts his hair. An androgynous is forbidden to resemble women who cover their heads for tznius and grows their hair long. He must carry himself with the dress and appearance of a man to ensure that he will not marry a man, which is also. The Torah asks the intimate relationship between two men. Since the androgynous might be a man, the Isra applies to him misafik. To avoid transgressing marrying a man, an androgynous must appear like a man. Although this will not prevent an androgynous from marrying a woman, an androgynous is allowed to marry a woman. Like men, he may not become tameh from a dead body if he's a kayin, and it's prohibited to round off the corners of his head. He may not make his hairline even all around by removing the hair from the temples, and it's also for him to destroy the corners of his beard. He may not shave certain parts of his beard with a razor like men. Now it's interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, scientifically and biologically speaking over here, the hormones in this person's body are not regular, and they're very, very schwach in a sense. And his hair may not grow properly like a woman's hair altogether. So whatever it is, it's a very complex thing. It's very complex, and it's very, very difficult to maneuver this whole situation. Halachically, it's difficult, and emotionally, it's very draining on all the people around that. Like men, he's mechuyev to do all the mitzvahs that are in the Torah, like lulav, sukkah, shofar, korban pesach, anything like that. Mishnah Gimel. Shavel l'noshim ketzad. How is androgynous like woman? Metame ba'odem kanoshim. Like woman, he becomes tameh if the androgynous discharges red blood. It becomes tameh like a nida, like a woman who discharges red blood. Ve'enim mesachem anoshim kanoshim. Like woman, he may not be alone with men. As we mentioned in the previous Mishnah, he cannot be alone with women. Like woman, he does not cause a woman to require yibum. That is, if a married man dies, leaving no children, and the only other brother that's alive is an androgynous, the almana does not require yibum or chalitza from the androgynous. As we mentioned when we spoke in Minchas Chinuch at the end of Mishnah Aleph. It's learned from a pasuk in the Torah that the halachas of yibum and chalitza do not apply where the only surviving brother cannot father children, which is assumed to be true of an androgynous. Like we said, chances are he won't be able to have children. The like woman, he does not receive a share of his father's inheritance with his sons. Like woman, he does not receive a share of kachim in the Beis Hamikdash when they're divided amongst the male kahanim. So going back to Einay Chelik Mabonim, we knocked him out in Mishnah Beis that he does not yarshin with the daughters, and we're knocking him out that he doesn't yarshin like the sons. So he's stuck in between. Does he get anything? I mean, maybe if there's enough, so I'll give him last. It doesn't say that. I don't know. Like a woman, he's disqualified from all edus in the Torah, and I mean, there's nashim are allowed to testify for certain things, so for that he's also allowed to testify. Like women, he may not participate in any biyah with a man who's forbidden to androgynous, like any of the arayas that's also to him. And like women, if androgynous who's a kayin has a forbidden relationship with a male relative, he would be disqualified from the kahuna, and he may not eat truma. A kohenes has the right to eat truma, but she loses that right if she has relationships with somebody forbidden to her, like any arayas or a mamzah. The halacha applies only to kahanas, and not to a male kohen. A male kohen who engages in forbidden relationships remains mutar to truma. Since an androgynous might be a woman, he must be treated with the chomer of woman. So if a kohen who's androgynous has a relationship with a close relative, any of their eyes, or like a mamzer, the kohen becomes asur to truma. However, if an androgynous kohen has relationships with a female that's asur to him, or with a ordinary male who's not specifically forbidden, although he was forbidden to do so, he's still allowed to eat truma because it's not a vada isra over here. Mishnah Dalet. Shaval anashim lanashim ketzad. How is androgynous like men and women? Like a man or a woman, if androgynous or his property suffers damage, the person who harmed him is mechuyev to pay for his damage. Just like a man or a woman, he's mechuyev to pay for all the damages that he does. Somebody who kills him intentionally is executed by Bezdin. Someone who kills him b'shoigeg has to go to your miklot. Like mothers of men and like mothers of women, the mother of androgynous sits the period of tahar blood upon giving birth to him. As we know from the beginning of Parshas Tazria, after a woman gives birth to a boy, she's tamei as a nida for 7 days, and for the following 33 days, she sits a period of tahar blood, which means that even if she has blood, if she sees dam, she doesn't become nida min ha-Torah. A woman who gives birth to a girl is tamei for 14 days, shavu ayim, and her period of Tara lasts for 66 days. Our Mishnah teaches that a woman who gives birth to an androgynous must also follow the chomer l'chumra over here, whether it's the law of giving birth to a girl or the law of giving birth to a boy, because androgynous could be either a male or a female. So she is tamei for the longer period of 14 days, like the mother of a girl, and then she's Tara only through the 40th day, like the mother of a boy, whose period of Tara ends on the 40th day. Since the mother of an androgynous resembles both the mother of a boy and the mother of a girl, she is described as being like the mothers of men and like mothers of women. Like men, like women, she receives a portion of kodesh hagvul, kodesh kalim. No, not kodesh kalim. If he's a kohen, he may be given trumas meiser and challah. If someone sees androgynous and says, "I'm a nazir," if this person is a man or a woman, he becomes a nazir, since one of these two options is certainly true. I mean, according to the Rav, it maybe be a little more complicated, but definitely the concept is that they're both simonim over here. Mishnah Hey, how is androgynous not like men or women? One is not obligated to bring an offering on account of his tumah. That if androgynous has both white and red discharges, in which case he's certainly tamei, then he or someone else who came into contact with the tumah entered the Beis Hamikdash or ate kachim, which a tamei person is forbidden to do so, he's not mechuyev to bring a korban. It's machlekes tanoim grada. But for practical purposes over here, we're going to leave it like this. Ve'ein sarfen al tamasai, one wouldn't burn truma on the account of his tumah, because it's not over here. It's not real tumah; it's only tumah misafik. Ve'ein narach like anashim like anashim. Unlike men and unlike women, androgynous cannot be the subject of erechin. Erechin is a neder which a person declares that he will give the erech, which is a value of a specific person, to the Beis Hamikdash. The Torah, Parshas Pichukoisai, gives a fixed erech for each person based on the age and gender. For example, the erech of a man between 20 and 60 years old is 50 shkalim. So our Mishnah teaches that someone who declares that he will give the erech of androgynous does not need to give anything, because the Torah refers there only to vaday zachars and vaday nekeves. It's also before here in the Gemara Nida on the Avchav Chesam Beis. Unlike men and unlike women, he cannot be sold as an evet. And if someone saw an androgynous and said, "I am a nazir," if this person is either not a man or not a woman, he becomes a nazir, since one of these two options, either not a man or not a woman, is certainly true. Rabbi Yossi says, "Androgynous bir b'fnei atzmai, v'lo yechru boi chachamim mimishim isha, avol tumtum eino kain ela safik ish safik isha." Everything that we discussed until now was based on the premise that androgynous is either a man or a woman, but we just don't know. However, Rabbi Yossi considers it possible that androgynous is neither a man or a woman, but belongs in a category of his own. So this Tana contrasts an androgynous with a tumtum, who is a person that has the whole makam is covered up, which makes it impossible to tell whether he's a man or a woman, which is also something that could happen with Bisman Hazeh. But now they remove that skin or that zach that's covering over that makam, and then they can be more clarified of who's behind it, so to speak. So Androgynous is a creature in his own right, and the Chacham could not decide whether he's a man or a woman. So there are three possibilities. Either Androgynous is a man, or a woman, or a third type. But a tumtum is not like this. Rather, a tumtum is possibly a man or possibly a woman, certainly not a third type. This is because a tumtum definitely has the organs of either a man or a woman. We just cannot tell because they are covered. But if they would be uncovered, then we would vaday know what they are. The next year will be a siyum on Seder Zeroim.